Hey folks, I made this short FSX film to show the airplanes that have been part of my life. This first one, November 6661 Papa, was my father's plane, a Piper Comanche 250. He bought the plane new in 1960 for $23,000, got his private pilot's license in it, and owned and flew it for 30 years. Though he never got his instrument rating, he flew this plane everywhere, from our home in Colorado Springs to the West Coast, the Baja Peninsula, Canada, Mexico, the Caribbean, South America, and the East Coast. Really, a lot more variety of places than I've done in my nearly 30 years of flying. And ironically, perhaps because he never got an instrument ticket, what I remember most about flying with my father are not all the places we flew to, but the places we got stuck in. Waiting out the weather, sometimes for days, in San Diego, Douglas, Arizona, Hermosillo, Mexico, or St. Louis. And though I've always loved airplanes, I can't really say I love flying with my father. Perhaps because being near the youngest meant I always had to fly in the back seat, where at the high altitudes my father nearly always flew, it was freezing and I had to huddle under blankets and parkas to stay warm. I didn't learn to fly until my 30s, inspired less by my father but by an addiction to Microsoft Flight Simulator. After getting my private license in 1994 and the usual combination of Cessna 150 and 172, I soon went in on a partnership on a 1968 Cherokee 180. November 7757 November. This is a great little plane in which went on to get my instrument rating and in which I flew for 10 years, taking it everywhere from my home in the East Coast, Florida, Texas, the West Coast, the Midwest, and Canada. On our second date, I took my wife on an aerial tour of Plum Island and the northern coast of Massachusetts. A real sign of trust in someone, considering I don't think she knew my last name at that point. We've been together now 12 years, so I'd like to think that her trust in me was well placed. One of our more memorable flights was across Lake Ontario into Toronto one summer. I remember flying through the haze and watching as the CNN tower came looming out of the fog like a gigantic ship's mast. It was beautiful. In 2010, I sold 57 November and bought, you guessed it, a Piper Comanche. This one a 62 model, November 76902 Papa. This plane was nearly nothing like my father's. It was a fuel-injected 260 with twin turbochargers. It had two sets of auxiliary fuel tanks for a total of 6 tanks and 120 gallons fuel capacity. Enough range to fly for up to 9 hours continuously. Had an updated panel with a GPS, with a large screen multifunctional display and a sophisticated S-Tech autopilot. This was a plane built to go places. Unfortunately, almost from the time I got it home, things started going wrong. I had to replace the propeller, the alternator, the magnetos, one of the turbos, the exhaust system, and nearly every component of the landing gear. Really, this plane was most happy when it was in the hangar. And nearly every flight, I had to ask myself what was going to go wrong today. I felt like a test pilot in my own plane. Too bad, because when it worked, it was a nice plane. It didn't take me long to buy another plane, and, you guessed it, it was a Comanche. Also a 62 model, November 77901 Pop. A plane that many of you have become familiar with through the magic of A2A simulations. Though similar in appearance, with its tip tanks, its blue and white paint scheme, and wonderful flying characteristics, 901 Papa is a completely different animal from 902 Papa. Other than normal regular maintenance, 901 Pop has been no trouble at all, and it has taken me reliably all over the East Coast, the far west, and the southwest, including a spectacular flight over the Grand Canyon. And I tell you, I don't care how much you've seen of the world, there's one thing I can say about the Grand Canyon. There is absolutely no way to be blasé about seeing this place. So where is all this leading? How many more planes might I have in my life? Who knows? I'd like to say the plane I have now is the last plane I'll ever own. It certainly does everything I want right now, but that's the funny thing about flying. There's always something else. Another place to go, another skill to learn, another plane you'd like to fly. I guess it has something to do with pilots' inherent refusal to remain still, to be complacent, a kind of wanderlust. But flying itself also presents constant challenges to our ability to manage our flying skills with our knowledge of the aircraft, the weather, in the mission at hand, whether it's flying aerobatics, doing a long cross-country flight over water, or just doing a simple flight for lunch, the $100 hamburger. For me, it all depends on what I want to do, how much money I have to do it with, and really how long I can continue to fly. Because face it, we all know that someday, sometime, we will have to give up flying. But until we do, we want to get as much out of it as we can.